Welcome everybody who's joining us. I'm going to do an introduction in a minute, but we're really glad to have you all here. If you want to do a little introduction of who you are, you can put it in the chat. Just say your name, where you're at, your role, and if you have any questions about this topic. Okay. Yeah, we've got people across the whole US. I think we have people from Texas. You're in New York, Colette. I'm in Oregon. We have people in California and Arkansas, Pennsylvania, I see on the call. I see Evelyn in Kenya on the call. Yeah, so I see a bunch of us, a lot of people in California. Awesome. So yeah, if you want to introduce yourself in the chat and say hi, you're welcome to. I'm going to start now and I'll keep letting people in. But my name is Emily Santiago. I'm the executive director of the Center for Cognitive Diversity, and we host a monthly guest lecture series for our trauma-informed specialist program. So it's open to the public, so we're glad to have a bunch of people join us. And today, I'm really excited to have Colette Ellis join us. I met Colette at a virtual South by Southwest conference when the pandemic just started. And I'm really excited to have her share some stress reduction techniques, in particular the EFT tapping strategy that is discussed in our book that we read from Bessel van der Kolk. So thank you so much, Colette, for joining us. If you want to share anything else about yourself before you get started.
Sure. Thank you. Thank you, Emily. It's a pleasure to be here with all of you on a Saturday from probably morning till I don't know how far into evening. We might be across all different time zones here. So thank you for taking the time out to participate in today's session. And yes, I'm excited to share with you all aspects of EFT tapping, emotional freedom technique. By way of training, I am a certified stress management coach. I received my training in that at a program out of Yale University School of Medicine. It's a program called Coping with Work and Family Stress, which is an evidence-based program intervention to help with dealing with stress. And it's interesting, I got that certification back in 2011, and who knew that all these years later that how important and how relevant it would be given what we are all facing with the global pandemic, not to mention all of the other social justice issues that we are dealing with in the US and quite honestly around the world. So I'm really excited to be here today with you to share some aspects of EFT. And I'm gonna, let's see if yes. So in addition to all that, I'm the founder of Start Within Coaching. And so my passion is really about helping particularly BIPOC leaders and more specifically women, although we do work with both genders and all identities we are accepting of. And again, here in New York City. And another way that I aim to share information is through my podcast. So I do host a podcast and would love to have you as part of that community as well. And I talk about, some of the issues that we're dealing with in the world. I also do what I call coach chats, which are sessions where I interview other healers, other coaches, other leadership experts, really just trying to deal with what it is that we are focusing on now. So would love to have you as part of that community. And if you are a podcast listener, would love to have you as part of our listening audience. So enough about me. I'm curious, what has been your state of mind through all of this? And I'm trying to make this bar go away, and it's not allowing me to do that. Okay. So if you would like to share in the chat, what has been your recent state of mind? What have you been feeling? And recognizing that any answer is your answer and that there are no right or wrong answers. I'm curious to know. And Emily, if you see them popping up or if you want to share as well.
And I fixed the chat because before it was all private chat. So now it's public chat. So yeah, I see people sharing that they're all over the place. They go through all these emotions. Some people sharing the stressed, tired, overwhelmed, anxious. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, a lot of sad,
Mm-hmm.
frustrated, nervous, fatigued,
Mm-hmm.
uh, sometimes happy, then other times not, shock. Um, yeah, some people feel grumpy and apprehensive. Someone shared they feel kind. You know, like maybe this is a time when we feel connected to other people, and you want to be kinder and like you're more understanding. I feel that when people are frustrated with me right now, or like somebody's in a store and getting upset if you're walking in a certain direction, like I'm like, we're all stressed. It makes sense. You know, you have a little more compassion, maybe. Stressed, exhausted.
Mm-hmm. Yes, exactly. And I think, and what I think is interesting about this is the ability for all of us to be able to check in with ourselves, right? To do that check in, whether it's a couple of times a day or just really seeing what it is that you are feeling. And it's interesting, I share. I have an EFT client that I'm working with, and it's interesting when we have conversation about feelings. What she's realizing, right? Like she said it to me in our last session. She's like, my feelings vocabulary is limited, right? Because that sense of really checking in and tapping into those feelings and feeling that it's safe to express, or even if you're not expressing, just feel those feelings, right? And so I think that given the work that we all, I'm going to say we all, because we are all in some form of healing, some form of education, it's important for us to do this for ourselves. And then it's also important to think about how do we create that space, whether it is, you know, within your team, if you are managing a team of educators, a team of administrators, and then also extending it there forward to our young people, right? Like, are they conscious of how they're feeling? Are they aware of how they're feeling? How can we help them to develop a stronger feelings vocabulary, right? Because then they can begin to articulate what they're feeling, and starting to make those connections between what I'm feeling and then is it something that may have caused or triggered that feeling, right? And again, I know we're speaking that kind of talk, like you're not going to talk about triggers with a kid, right? Like you may not use that language, but it's that sense of helping them understand, like, oh, like I'm going to be at home instead of in school, and that makes me feel sad, right? Like really being able to sort of articulate what those feelings are. So I think that this is important for ourselves, and then important in how do we create safe spaces for the people that we're working with to have that same experience. So thank you for sharing that. I will admit I was a little frustrated when I couldn't get into the meeting for a little bit. So I'm much better now that I'm here with all of you. And I think that that's it, right? And also normalizing it, right? That having, like, we don't have to be happy all the time, and that's not necessarily, I don't know if that's even an outcome, right? Because it could mean that if we feel the pressure to feel happy all the time, then what are we suppressing? What are we holding back? What are we smothering down? And that's one of the great things I think about EFT tapping, because it's interesting when people hear about it for the first time and I'll say, you know, oh, we need to talk about what's going on with you, right? That first sense of like, okay, if I'm mad, you really want me to say I'm mad out loud as we're tapping on this thing, right? Emotional freedom technique is the way that we can start to uncover what the feelings are and start to help our mind and body to release the emotional charge around situations, around our experiences. So that's why it's one of my favorite modalities that I use with clients in doing these kinds of sessions as well. Emily, you mentioned that you guys are reading about it. So how is there kind of, I mean, I'm going to do an overview, but like, would you say there's some familiarity then with the group here?
Not in depth, but we read The Body Keeps the Score. So obviously, we see the importance of somatic practices, and using different techniques above and beyond, like talking about things that we have, we have trauma embedded in our bodies, and sometimes it's not reached by words, right? I think that's our understanding. And EFT was mentioned as being an effective technique, but we haven't had any real introduction to that.
Got it. Got it. Yeah,
Yeah.
I think, I don't know, it's probably up there if you can see my bookshelf. The Body Keeps the Score is definitely on my bookshelf. And it is that sense of, I always say, liken it to, right, you have a situation, say it's an unpleasant situation, and you think, all right, I'm over that, right? And then either you hear something, see something, or even smell something, right? And boom, you're taken right back to that situation. And it's all of what we're talking about, right? That things get embedded and stored in our minds, our bodies, our cells, right? And so EFT, emotional freedom technique, is one of these tools. And it is evidence-based for those of you that the science behind it. And it does come from a whole realm of energy work, including thought field therapy. There's also the matrix re-imprinting, which I am not trained in, but I am doing some reading about that because I feel like I just need to continue to expand my knowledge about all of these modalities. But in some ways, it's often called that emotional acupuncture, if you will. And I love that. I love that analogy because if someone does have a fear of needles, you could tap on, I have a fear of needles, and you're not using needles, you're just using your fingertips. So it's a powerful technique, and it can be used for emotional stress, anxiety, overwhelm, fear, phobias, trauma. And it also can be used for physical pain. So whether that's pain, aches. And one of the things that's always interesting to me, and again, if you're reading that book, you know this, that I was once doing one of these sessions without slides. We were in a smaller group, and I asked if someone wanted to share what they were dealing with, and someone said, oh, it's back pain. And I thought, okay, great. We'll have an example of physical perhaps release through doing the tapping. And so we got through maybe about 1.5 rounds, and then all of a sudden it was like the emotions started to flow. And keeping things confidential, but long story short, it wasn't just about the back pain, right? There was a traumatic experience that this woman had experienced, and they had become linked. So this pain in the lower back was really about other things that were going on in her life. So, which leads me often to ask the question, right? When I do have a pain in my neck, it's kind of like, okay, was I doing something weird, or is something else going on in my world, right? So all of these modalities, again, for your own personal well-being, can be helpful to start asking those questions, right? I don't know how much, I used to say that because I used to carry like a heavy bag with my laptop in it. So then I'd be like, all right, yeah, the shoulder pain is because of the bag, but now I'm not going out. So if I have shoulder pain, I got to ask myself, what's happening with me? Because you're not carrying a heavy laptop anymore, right? So I like to say that modalities like EFT can help you be your own emotional detective, right? Starting to figure out what's going on, checking in with yourself. And then again, one of the other things that we will continue to talk about, right, is how do you introduce this into your work environments, or how do you share this with family and friends, right? Being able to help them as well. So yeah, so it's about tapping. Using usually either hand to tap on the points. And if you have had acupuncture or you are familiar with Chinese medicine, the points may be familiar to you. And what's interesting about it is that each point connects to a particular meridian in the body, and each point also connects to emotions. So one of the ones that I find, probably because it's one of the things that I sometimes deal with, I realize that I often deal with stress and I feel it in my stomach or digestive tract. So one of the things I always share when people are new to EFT, if you tap under your eye, so that sort of ridge socket point right there under your eye. Now that meridian it's connected to the stomach meridian. So it's one of these things where if you are feeling a little bit upset stomach, you maybe have eaten something, or again, could be something else going on. But there is that ability to just tap on the point and possibly feel some relief. And usually I find that if I have the issue, eventually, it might lead to a burp or some sort of, relief in the stomach. The other thing is that tapping under the eye is also connected in terms of emotions around fear and anxiety. So it can be helpful if you're feeling a little anxious. And the thing I love about it, I live in New York City, so when I did ride the subway pre-COVID, right, it was like, I could be tapping on under my eye and nobody necessarily needs to know that, oh, this is what I'm dealing with, right? So it can be one of those modalities that's very easily accessible as long as you have access to your hands. And I guess I should say now in COVID that your hands are clean, right? All of these things we've got to add into protocol, right? So make sure you've washed your hands before you touch your face. But yeah, so it's definitely a very accessible, it's a non-invasive modality, and it's pretty simple to use in terms of, again, for yourself or introducing it to others.
Mm-hmm. And as educators, with children, we're always like, tell me why you're upset or tell me what's wrong. And a lot of times the kids don't have the words, like they can't explain it, they just feel it. And it's good to have a tool for that. Yeah, because
Right.
they do have to say they have a stomach ache, but we know they're not sick. And what do we do when that happens?
Exactly. So it could be like, oh, your tummy hurts. Like, hey, let's try this and see what happens. Tap under your, and either showing them how to do it. And again, yeah, all of this in COVID, right? I don't know how many of us will be in person with our children versus virtual, but again, we're doing this via Zoom, so you can definitely be doing it with students, parents as well, like helping parents to understand this so that they can do it with their children. So yeah, it's definitely a very accessible modality. Is that a question in the chat, or are we?
Let me see if it's come up. Erica asked, what side of does it matter which side of the face? Do you do both? One side?
Yeah, it does not matter. Usually if I'm not doing a webinar, if I'm doing it myself, I will tend to do both hands. That's just how I feel comfortable. But usually for webinars, I just do one, so you can actually still see the face and see the point. Yeah, and also in terms of the tapping, right? You're not trying to like bang yourself, right? So it should be like enough pressure, but not necessarily, it's not necessarily to cause pain, although it is interesting to note, again, going back to the body keeps score, I will note that certain spots, like particularly under my arm at times, like even when I tap there, you might notice that it's sore. So it's not necessarily that your tapping is making it sore. You just might notice that there is soreness in your body. So again, all of this is about, for yourself, at least if you're doing it for yourself, becoming more aware. So yes, either hand, as well as like light, I would say light to moderate pressure, I guess, whatever feels comfortable for you. Although I have been, truth and honesty, there have been moments where I'm like, I need to, like, I'm like trying to tap harder if that's going to actually make it go away faster, but it doesn't necessarily do so. So the thought process, if I wanted to share sort of an overview, and then hopefully we can get into some tapping on some issues, hopefully on something that's happening. So the whole process is the check-in. So before you start tapping, and so it even might be as simple a question as I did at the start of the webinar, as like, how am I feeling, or what am I feeling? And so then you want to check in on a scale of 0 to 10. And basically it's asking yourself, so if when they ask even in the hospital, right, like what's your pain level, right, on the scale of 0 to 10. So it's the same thing. And it's really also about sort of tuning in, whether you're doing it for yourself or with a student or a parent or someone else, you want to ask the question, right? And so how am I feeling on a scale of 0 to 10, or what's, how strong, what's the intensity of this issue for me on a scale of 0 to 10? And you can tell by the emojis, right? The goal is that you're moving towards the 0. So 0 to 1, meaning I have very little intensity or I have very little feeling around this issue, to 10 being that, yes, this issue is very present. This issue is very intense for me. So it's about checking in with yourself, and then you'll see after the rounds of tapping, you also do the check-in again to see if there's been any shift in the intensity around the issue. So it's checking in beforehand, and then creating what we call the setup statement. So the setup statement, so there is something, and I'm not sure that it's covered in the Body Keeps the Score. It's possible that it is. There's something, I always ask the question, so has anyone ever done or written or used positive affirmations, as part of their self-care practice, where you're like, every day I wake up and I say, I am awesome. Have people done that? I can't see, but I'm presuming that you have.
Hands up.
Hands up, yeah. So, and then have you ever had the experience that there's some little voice in the back of your mind that's going, yeah, no, you're not, or no, that's not true. Like, that's not actually the case, right? And so the technical term for that is psychological reversal, right? Where we have some resistance to the positive, or even I think just in general, we're kind of like, we're hardwired more towards the negative in some ways. So the setup statement, and you are tapping on the side of the hand, again, either hand, to help to negate this, this resistance. So the setup statement is, even though I feel, so it might be, even though I'm feeling frustrated right now, I love and accept myself as I am, right? Or even though I'm feeling angry, I love myself the way that I am, or I accept myself the way that I am. And so we start off tapping with that setup statement, and you say that statement 3 times while tapping on the side of the hand. So it would be, even though I'm feeling frustrated, I love and accept myself. Even though I'm feeling frustrated, I love and accept myself. Even though I'm feeling frustrated, I love and accept myself. Question?
We have a chat. Let me pull it up.
All right, it pops in my screen so I can only see.
Yeah, someone asked about the research, and before this call, I can definitely send that out in an email, because there's some great research that shows it's up there with CBT, right?
Yeah.
For the same number of sessions, CBT is an evidence-based practice, cognitive behavior therapy. And this one, linking positive statements with physical emotions, with physical approaches is really powerful. So yeah, I'll share the research after.
Yes, absolutely, absolutely. And not just the positive. And so we actually go into the negative first, right? So this setup statement is almost, think of it as it's creating space, right? Remember we talked about, like, if we don't have a rich feelings vocabulary, or we haven't really given ourselves permission to feel, or we've been told that, it's not good to be angry. It's not, it's not safe to feel or express our emotions, right? You can almost think of the setup statement as creating that space, because when we're tapping, we're going to be starting with that feeling of frustration, and we're going to go into what that feels like, where I'm feeling it, why I'm feeling it, when have I felt like this before. So that's another thing about EFT. It's about releasing the emotional charge, if you will, hence the battery on this slide. And in order to do so, it's actually by going into the issue. So more often than not, if you're feeling frustrated, before doing I'm great and I'm awesome and all those wonderful things. Like, I'm not saying that positive affirmations don't work. The value of going into EFT is that you can start to uncover and unpack and hopefully release where did those unworthiness thoughts start to come? How did I start to develop those beliefs? And when I'm doing work with clients, right, often we'll start to hear like, oh, this is what I heard, either from, call it, parents, family, and also in adulthood, right, based on personal experiences or professional experiences, right? So we can take those experiences and we can internalize them, and then they become part of our belief system. And then the last thing I'll say on this before moving on is, I've also even had, I will always, when I'm working with a client, I always, we come up with, okay, what's the setup statement? And then we sometimes we'll talk about, right, is I love and accept myself, or I accept myself. Does that feel right? Does that feel comfortable? Because sometimes that's even the place to start, right? If I can't even say I love and accept myself, well, then let's talk about that and let's tap on that, right? So, and you can shift. So, and particularly with kids, right? It might be a little bit more like, I'm okay right now, even though my tummy hurts, I'm okay right now. Or, so there are ways that you can shift it so that the person, if you're working with someone else, it helps them to feel comfortable and that the language feels right and appropriate to them. So we've got the setup statement, and then we are tapping. So the tapping points again, and so if I am working with someone, I will ask a lot of questions. So if we go back to the frustrated feeling, well, what's going on? Why did something happen that caused the frustration? I will also ask, where do you feel that frustration? Do you notice it in your body? So all of these things, so that as we're tapping on the points, we're actually speaking about, oh, I feel this frustration in my throat. It feels like my throat is closing up. It reminds me of that time when I couldn't get into the store. I'm making this up, right? So we're actually tapping through while speaking about the issue, right? So that's where in some ways it may differ, or maybe not differ. I guess in talk therapy, you can also talk about what's going on, but the point is that you're not just voicing it, you are actually tapping through the points in your body. So that's sort of, and you would, typically I start on the eyebrow and move through side of eye, going under the eye, under the nose, on the chin, on the collarbone. Yeah, and it's sort of like, there's like that sort of, it's almost like the indentation below the bone. Under the arm. And that is sort of equivalent, actually they say, for if you're wearing some sort of bra, or just sort of like equivalent to like the nipple point, but under your arm. And then top of the head. Are there questions or comments that?
Yeah, what comes up for people? They're asking, what would you say while you're doing this? If you can repeat that and remind us. And
yeah. And I would actually, I will get to that. Why don't we go through this and then let's actually do it, because it's actually easier to do as opposed to me making it up. Yeah. So then, and then, like I said earlier, you check in, right? So like, has there been some shift in the feeling and in the intensity with the issue? And one of the things that I say, sometimes it depends on if you are working with someone or even with yourself. Sometimes the number might go up if it's something that you haven't perhaps maybe thought about in a while, or the fact that, you know, you're tapping on it and speaking about it might increase the intensity. So it's not all that uncommon for it to go up before it goes down. Like someone will be like, oh, I'm a 5 on this. And then we start talking about it. It's like, oh my God, like thinking about this again is actually increasing the intensity, right? So that is something that can happen if particularly, you know, 1 or 2 rounds, and you might think, wow, as I really think about this and I'm really recalling it, you know, there are techniques. There's something called the movie technique, right? Where you think about a situation, you give the situation a title as if you would a movie, and you are tapping through that scenario as, you know, to recall that situation, again, to reduce the emotional charge. So if it's something that's happened in the past, you might not be currently, you know, it may not have that intensive feeling, but actually talking about it may increase the intensity until you do further rounds of tapping to release that intensity.
There was a question. Can you hear me? There was a question about maybe the emotions that might be associated with the area that's tapped. You mentioned some stress and you tap under your eye. Is there some sort of resource that people can reference that show maybe what types of emotions are associated with the areas that are tapped?
Yeah, I can. I have a graphic that I can share. I can share that with Emily, and yeah, that sort of looks at where. So you might have past trauma, old wounds here, anger and resentment on the side of the eye. Yeah, so I can share that. So that, yeah, that can be helpful. Again, for like quick. I don't like to say quick hits, but in a way it could be, or for like acute, like really wanting to, like, I'm angry and just kind of, all right, like focusing on that and being able, or with a child, like being angry in the moment and just being like, okay, we're going to tap here. Let's breathe through it and tap here. Right. Yeah. So I can definitely do that.
Even that connection with being able to do something about what's happening, right, is super powerful. Like, why did we hoard so much toilet paper when this started? Like, it was an action, right? Like, and so that is powerful in itself, I think.
Exactly. Yeah. So frustration, right? Yeah. And there are points on the hand, right? So the thumb point is around grief and loss, right? So what have we lost as a result of going through this, right? Yeah, and again, it is about helping us to process and deal with what we are going through ourselves, and again, helping others to do the same.
And then there was another question as well in terms of specific resources, books where someone could follow along if they're working with adults versus books that are related, or where this can be adapted more specifically to children. Do you have any recommendations on that?
Yeah, I mean, in terms of tapping, I mean, even if you Google or even on YouTube, right? There are folks like Brad Gates, and there are the Ortners do tapping. They've got a whole, they do a tapping summit every fall through the tapping solution. I think Carol Look still does. So yeah, there are a lot of practitioners. So there are a lot of us that are doing tapping, and so, and the videos, I guess, can be helpful in terms of you are following along. So, and when we get into tapping, you'll see this, that if you are leading it with someone, usually, so when I'm doing it with a client, I'm getting all the information, and then I am saying the statements, and then the person follows after me. So I would say, even though I'm feeling frustrated, and then the client would say, even though I'm feeling frustrated. So it's almost like it's a call and response. format. So if you're watching it on video, obviously the video has already been recorded, so you would just be following along and tapping with the video. One of the benefits of working with a practitioner is that, right, it's based specifically on your issue. But to the point of all of you working with students or parents or other folks on your team, even just knowing the points and the emotions, right? They, like we just said, can be that helpful way of being like, I'm feeling angry, and just talking through that, or even just tapping on the point. So there are lots of resources. EFT Universe has a place where you can even take courses and become certified in this. So yeah, there's a whole breadth of content out there on EFT.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. So after the check-in, we make an adjustment, if you will, to the setup statement. So even though I'm still feeling frustrated, or even though my tummy still hurts a little bit, right? Because maybe you've checked in, you've done the tapping, and you were at a 7 and it's now down to like a 4, right? So maybe we do more tapping. And so then the setup statement gets adjusted to, even though I'm still having this feeling, I love and accept myself. And then it's pretty much the same process. So the process pretty much doesn't change. What may change is, again, what you're saying as you are going through the various rounds.
Just doing
in
this,
case
I feel great. Sorry, go ahead, Mari.
in case the question comes up, it's how important is the wording? Does it have to be a certain way? Just a general explanation about how you frame what you are saying or what you're guiding someone through.
Yeah, yeah, great question. Yeah, and we can, we have time, so we can actually do it. Yeah, so if I'm doing it with someone, I'm gonna ask a lot of questions typically, because I want to get the specificity. So, and if you're doing it with yourself, you also want to, try to be as specific. So yes, and that's a great question, because it connects to what I was talking about earlier, the difference between, say, tapping with a video where what is already been recorded versus tapping on your own, and both are helpful. But the difference is the level of specificity. So, I know someone that does videos on like money beliefs, right? And so tapping around like feelings of scarcity. And that's great because it can talk about it in general. But if you have a very specific experience of, I have feelings of scarcity because I was in debt when I, graduated from college and I owed $50,000, right? The general videos can be helpful, but being able to also tap on those specific emotions, what it felt like, I was embarrassed because I had this debt, right? So the more specific you can be, the better. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. My daughter's teacher did it with a whole class, like in a general way. And it was just like positive sense of self, and I have control and I can make good choices and whatnot. But yeah, I can see how then if a child is struggling, you could go over and be like, tell yourself you're amazing, or whatever it is that they need to hear. And yeah,
or start with, why am I feeling angry?
Yeah.
Or why am I feeling anxious? And that's because I feel like that there's also this other value of it, right? Because then that starts to normalize the fact that we have those feelings, right? Just as much as we know that we're awesome and we're amazing, we can also have days where we feel crappy, right? And that's okay, right? So being able to have this as a tool to say, yeah, I can't, I want to be in school and I can't be there, and that makes me mad, right? And like being able to have that voice, and then also, using the tapping as a way of releasing it, because I think the thing is we hold on to the negative emotions and then they don't go anywhere, right? And then that's what causes the challenge. And then we can do okay, and then we're going to have all this fun when we do all these other things, even though I can't be in school. But I think there's still that value of tapping into whatever that painful, difficult, challenging emotion is. And that's something that EFT can do really well.
That's a great point. I mean, even myself, we're always pushing to the positive, which can be toxic, right? That you want to just have the child feel seen and heard for the experience and where they're at. I hear that. Yeah, awesome.
Yeah, I mean, and think of like, you know, I'm thinking of bullying, right? So the experience of having been bullied, right? There are gonna be all sorts of emotions around that, and helping the child to process that and release that before we get to, you know, which can actually help with not internalizing whatever whatever the things that the bully was saying, right? You know, like as a kid, you know, when I was in junior high school, we've all had those experiences, right? But then you start to believe it, or as adults, right? Someone says something about you and you're kind of like, oh, that's not me, right? But actually using a modality like tapping to release, wow, when she said that, I really thought I didn't belong, right? You know, like, and really being able to help release some of those things.
Mm-hmm.
All right, let's not get stuck in theory. Who wants to do some tapping?
Who wants to try it?
Am I the only one who gets excited about tapping?
Oh, yeah.
That's a little weird, right?
I saw Erica's hand go up. Ellen's hand has gone up.
All right.
Can you do two different people, or should we just randomly?
Yeah, let's see. I need to get my pen. I want to write things down. I don't want to trust it to memory. All right.
Erica, do you want to try it?
I do, but I don't really want to do it. I don't really want to talk about my thing in front of everybody. I don't know.
Okay,
yes,
I just wanted to like ask they were going to do it as a group, and I was like, oh, cool, yeah. But I don't really want to.
That's okay. Yeah,
that's okay. So the question that just came up in the chat. So this will be a model, and there's maybe the last term. I won't say definitely, but maybe the last term. So there's something called borrowing benefits. And you wouldn't necessarily have to say that to the class, but you know this, is that if you're doing it like we're doing it in a group, what you might say is, okay, everyone think about something physically or in your mind or in your, you know, something that you're feeling that you would like to get some relief or release around. So everyone have something in your mind. Mm-hmm. Now, really tap in, right? And then ask yourself, so on a scale of 0 to 10, how intensely am I feeling this, dealing with this? Like, where am I on that scale of 0 to 10? Mm-hmm. And you may want to jot down the number. And as we do the group tapping, what I want you to do is follow along and tap, you know, say what I'm saying or what the other person, you know, that we're talking about. But just having this aspect, you wouldn't say this with the kids, but just having focused on your issue and doing the tapping, you will still get should still get some release around your issue. And that's the same, that's what I'm saying, even the same thing. So if you find tapping videos on EFT on YouTube, right? You can tap through the video again, even though they're not saying the exact same words that you would say, you can still get benefit. So that's the value of doing it in a group, is that I guess beforehand you'd want people to, you know, focus on what's going on for them. And then like we're gonna do is, again, if you have, I don't know, if maybe in a classroom it might be, I don't know how, with kids, right? Would a child feel comfortable saying it in front of a group, or might you do something with another teacher or administrator? Like, okay, we're gonna tap around some issues because you know sort of what the kids are dealing with, and you do it in that way, right? So when I do with adults, it's usually like this, where I'll ask someone to volunteer, and we talk about something that they feel, you know, that they would wanna share in front of a group. So with kids, you probably would wanna gauge whether it's, a child that's actually sharing something. And again, it depends, like maybe with older children, that may not be, you know, I don't know, like you guys know your kids better than I know your kids, but this model I think could be tweaked to work. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Even things like, I wish I could hug my friends, right? Or
Exactly.
something like that feeling of frustration of not having connection that you want.
Exactly. Exactly. Right. So, and if you're right, and that's great, because then there could be ways that you could get, maybe even if it's having them write it or having them share it with you, have them complete a sentence, right? What do I wish I could do? Like finding ways to get from them what they're feeling, so that even if they're not the ones that are demonstrating and modeling, that what you're saying is still somehow connected to what they're dealing with. Does that resonate? Right. So like, yeah, like asking them maybe either one-on-one or asking them to write it or somehow get that to you. And then you could use that as, I'm really frustrated that I can't give a hug. I'm really frustrated that I can't, play outside without wearing a mask, like whatever it is, and using that as part of the tapping script. All right, so who wants to be in the Zoom hot seat? Just kidding.
Ellen, are you still open to trying it out? No pressure.
I also didn't know I was volunteering to do it in front of everybody, but sure.
Okay.
If you want to, no pressure.
I think that this is, I believe you've created a safe space. I know Emily and I already talked about this, so I think that if no one else, I think she is still possibly willing to do it as well.
Yeah, yeah. I will try it if nobody else does. So.
All right, you're in, Emily.
I'm in it. Okay. Regroup and remember. All right.
Was that, it's like the cartoons where it's like everybody take 2 steps forward and everybody takes 2 steps back. Emily's like, wait, what happened?
It's okay. I got it. Yeah.
All right. So what are we tapping on today, Emily?
I think it's just the anxiety of the start of school years. Like today is the start of our courses again for the Trauma Informed Specialist program, but just like whenever classes start again, like even thinking about it, when I was a teacher, my stomach just like gets really, I get all those butterflies in my stomach, and just that thought of going back and being responsible for a group of people, holding that responsibility. So I think that anxiety of the start of the school year.
And when you think about being responsible for all those people, it makes you feel...
yeah, my palms start to sweat a little bit. My stomach feels like it's lifting up, and yeah, you feel a little panicky, a little anxious, and this sense of self-doubt, right? Even if you're confident, even if you are so prepared, there's just that feeling that comes up.
And
I bet other people feel that right now too at the start of the school year, right?
And on a scale of 0 to 10, where would you say that you are on that? Right
probably a 7.
7. Okay. And does this feeling remind you of anything or another time?
Like public speaking, right? Similar to an experience with public speaking, like that feeling of just being hyper alert or on edge and stuff.
And is that in the classroom or?
Could be in the classroom, or if I give a talk. Actually, as a child, I experienced selective mutism. I was an anxious kid, and so I had years where I couldn't speak in the classroom. And so I think I still have, even though I've obviously overcome that, but it still kind of resonates, that similar feeling.
And that feeling was the same physical feeling you mentioned, or is there something different about that?
I think that one, it was more in my throat too, right? Like a tightness in your throat, like physically didn't feel comfortable speaking. Whereas now it's more in your stomach and like almost in your skin, right?
So if we were to create the setup statement, what would be your even though I
feel anxious, I know I am capable, and what do you guys think? What was it again? What was, I love myself and I'm capable, whatever.
think I have. Okay. All right, so we'll all get started. And so what, again, for the group tapping, I will say the statement while tapping on the point. I will pause and then you can respond. I guess if you want to stay off mute, Emily, and then everyone else can go on mute. So
Okay.
so you can be saying it for everyone else in your space. Yeah, we'll get started. And like I said, either hand will go. So even though I'm feeling anxious,
I'm feeling anxious,
I love myself and know I am capable.
I love myself and I know I'm capable.
Even though I am feeling anxious,
I'm feeling anxious,
I love myself and know that I am capable.
I love myself and know that I'm capable.
Even though I am feeling anxious,
I'm feeling anxious,
I love myself and know that I am capable.
I love myself and know that I'm capable.
This anxiety
This
it's about a 7 right now.
is about a 7 right now.
It's the start of the school year.
It's the start of the school year.
And even just thinking about that,
Even just thinking about that
gives me butterflies in my stomach.
gives me butterflies in my stomach.
Having to be responsible
Having to be responsible
for all of those people
for all of those people
makes my palms sweat.
makes my palms sweat.
Almost like my skin is crawling.
Almost like my skin is crawling.
All of this anxiety
All of this anxiety.
it's like my stomach is just going to lift off.
It's like my stomach is just going to lift off.
And no matter how well prepared I am,
No matter how well prepared I am,
I still have feelings of doubt.
I still have feelings of doubt.
How is this all going to work?
How is this all going to work?
I'm really unsure.
I'm really unsure.
And that makes me feel anxious.
And that makes me feel anxious.
It's kind of like when I was a kid
Kind of like when I was a kid
and I had to speak in front of the class.
and I had to speak in front of the class.
That was scary.
That was scary.
I'm feeling a bit of that same anxiety right now.
I'm feeling a bit of that same anxiety right now.
All of this uncertainty.
All of this uncertainty.
Will I be able to handle it all?
Will I be able to handle it all?
Start of the school year jitters.
Start of the school year jitters.
Really present for me right now.
Really present for me right now.
Okay, take a deep breath in.
Wow.
Check in What did you notice? What came up?
You know, it's like that feeling seen and heard, having somebody else say what you're experiencing and acknowledging it just kind of dissipates it, right? We talk about that. Kids need to be seen and heard. We need it too. And it really does. It's just like erased. So it's pretty cool.
0 to 10, where are you? You were a 7 before. Where would you say?
Oh, like a 2, maybe.
Wow.
Yeah, feel great.
Other folks want to say what was it like? What came up? What did you notice? Either about the process or about how you felt doing it.
Go ahead.
I noticed that certain spots where I tap are more tender than others.
Right.
Jenna, you want to share?
Nope, I was just agreeing. I was wondering if like a certain spot was more tender or like brought about more emotion, if that's like you're hitting on a different feeling, or I don't know. Is there a reason why that happened?
Yeah, I mean, again, because they are connected to the physical, meridians as well as emotion. So yeah, it could be that it's tapping into an emotion. I don't know, depending on where you felt where it was tender. Yes, definitely.
Awesome. And just a time check, we have four minutes.
Oh gosh, wow,
yeah. Time is flying by.
Got a little teary-eyed, felt like a release. Yeah, great.
Yeah. Yeah, just that physical sensation is just gone for me. Like, it's really amazing how that works. I could imagine all teachers should do that before the start of this crazy year. Like, we all need a little extra tool in our toolkit for handling this level of stress.
Yes. I was gonna. I don't know. Sorry, I was thinking what I would share as the last slide. But yeah, so I'm happy to. I'm glad that we did get to do the rounds. I can't believe that it went so fast. One of the teachers in school uses this after recess. Yeah, definitely recess.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, yeah, definitely share your info so people can check out your podcast, Colette, or
I'm just gonna
follow you on social media. This was so valuable. I'm really glad you made the time. So thanks for coming.
Oh, sure, my pleasure. I was gonna see if I could do the front slide really quick again.
Perfect. All right, and yeah, if people have like last minute questions before we sign off, any pressing questions coming up, or you see how you can connect with Colette, yeah, this was wonderful. And so we will